So, hi everybody, I'm Megan. I'm one of the AAEM RSA board members, and I will be moderating this session of Climbing the Hill. This topic is going to be about CMGs and their involvement in emergency medicine. Our two panelists today are Dr. Mark Reiter and Dr. Robert McNamara. They're both experts in this topic, and they can fill you in a little bit more about how they came to be involved in both AAEM and this specific topic, but I will let them take it away.
Okay, Mark, you want to go first?
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Reiter. My day job is I am residency director at the University of Tennessee residency program in Murfreesboro and Nashville, Tennessee. I'm also a past president of the American Academy of Emergency Medicine. And I also work with Bob. We together run the new AAEM physician group, which is a group that is owned by AAEM that helps start up new emergency medicine independent democratic groups and helps existing democratic groups manage their practices more efficiently and effectively. So how did I get involved in AAEM? I had a mentor during my very first year of medical school who was a disciple of none other than Dr. Robert McNamara, back then, who told me a lot of good things. Remember Tom or Becky, Bob?
Yep.
I don't know if you've heard that name in a long time, but as a fourth-year medical student, I met Bob and a variety of other leaders and got more and more involved by the time I was in the middle of my residency student association and have remained very involved since then. Bob, I'll let you take over.
Okay, I'm currently the chair of emergency medicine at Temple University Hospital. Prior to that, I was the program director at what was the old Medical College of Pennsylvania program. Then became Drexel. It was a combination with Hahnemann. I came over to Temple here in '99. It was a division of medicine, and we made it into a full academic department. So we have a robust training program, 14 per year. It's serving a poor population. It's the violence in the city has gotten out of control like a lot of the big cities. So it's a great training environment. So I trained from 1982 to 85. The Medical College of Pennsylvania was the third oldest program. It was founded by Dave Wagner, who was the guy who got board certification for emergency medicine. Quaker, strong values, great leader, great mentor. And one day, I got an ad as I was faculty. I stayed on as academic faculty. I've been offered some jobs in the community, but actually, interestingly, I worked for what was a contract group as a moonlighter because we were told to do that to check out the jobs. And I basically felt slimed by it. And I only did 2 shifts. And I decided to take the lowest paying job offered to me, which was an academic position. And I was going up the food chain, became program director, and I got a mailer for a book called The Rape of Emergency Medicine. So this is back in 1992. So I looked at it. I walked into Dave Wagner's office, and said, "Hey, Dave, do you see this?" He goes, I already ordered it. So if the chair ordered the book, you got to order the book yourself. So you can stay up with the chair. I got it. I read it. There was a survey in there where a bunch of questions were asked. This was written by the Phoenix, who now we found out was Jim Keenan. And we had just taken over an ED, a community site, from a contract management group. And, we essentially studied the quality of care, cost of care before and after, showed the board certified residency trained docs, higher quality care, less bogus testing. We didn't order lumbar spine films on every motor vehicle accident, and published those papers in the annals of emergency medicine. Rape of emergency medicine came out about corporate groups and sort of things started coalescing. I wrote to Keeney and I said, and oh, you should read the book. It's not that great of a read, but you can read it fast. But it essentially pointed out in the real world that there was major issues in emergency medicine where essentially, companies were hiring docs, making money off them and, low quality of care. It was all about getting the bucks, running the contract. One thing led to another. I told Keeney, I'd done some research and I said, if half of what you say is true, as an academic, I ought to get involved. And he sent me, and this file case right behind me, I still have 120 handwritten surveys from emergency physicians. And when I read those, my eyes were open. I said, holy, this is what's going on outside the academic medical centers. And that file is available to you on the AAEM website as well. It's called Readers' Responses to the Rape of Emergency Medicine. And the stuff that people wrote was like, after 9 years of abuse, I'm leaving the specialty of emergency medicine. Leaving my residency was like leading a lamb to the slaughter. One guy wrote, if I had known we were going to be raised to be a vast pool of itinerant cotton pickers for the national groups. I mean, that's the analogy he gave. I would have never chosen emergency medicine. And then I started thinking so-and-so graduated and they changed jobs really fast. Like, what happened there? And then I started talking to people and oh yeah, I researched it. I went to the library. I read every issue of Annals, all the letters, all the editorials. I went back to the history and essentially found out that everything Keeney was saying in his book was true. And I kind of, at that point, said to myself, I'm doing all this stuff. I was doing interosseous research, magnesium and asthma. We were killing pigs in the lab. I said, this is an important thing, man. Yeah, anybody can do magnesium research. So I got involved and I told Keeney, look, your issues of corporate are important, but the other issue was board certification in emergency medicine. At the time, the American board was being sued to reopen the practice track. And that pissed off a lot of people in academics because, it's not just the test, it's also the training. So I convinced Keeney, I said, look, if you make it all board certified, I'll join and I'll join your board of directors if you want. So, and he, a couple of weeks later said, yeah, let's do it. And that initially had AAEM take off. And then we started to get more and more into the corporate issues. And as the specialties progressed, I'll show some slides here. It was a good thing we formed. We haven't stopped it, but we've definitely, been the only force out there to prevent the takeover. So with no further ado, I will share my screen and we will, host disable screen sharing. So can I be enabled to share my screen?
You should be able to now.
All righty, and here we go. We'll pull it up. And we'll do slideshow from the beginning. All righty, so CMGs. How did EM be controlled by corporations and private equity? So I'm a past president of AAEM, just like Mark, and I'm the chief medical officer. He's the CEO of the AAEM Physician Group. And we're here. It's clear to me that there's a crisis in emergency medicine. Most acutely represented by the fact that residents couldn't get jobs last year. And while things are opening up a little bit, it's going to be a tight job market. You're all probably aware, if you're on this call, that the ACEP study said there's going to be an oversupply of 9 to 10K by 2030. And if you read AAEM stuff, there's basically corporate dominance. There's a decline of doctor-owned practices. And, you're the younger generation, the RSA. What about the future? The current president of ACEP was quoted in EP Monthly saying it's so bright, you're going to have to wear shades. The question is it bright, or is that because it's on fire, or because it's actually a bright future? Unfortunately, I think a lot of it is because it's on fire. So I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to review the development of emergency medicine practice, how and why did we get here. Talk a little bit about corporate EM, mention about, why it's important with the non-physician practitioners, because they're the ones that control who sees the patient, and talk a little bit about some of the possible solutions out there, some of the things that we've done. Try to give maybe 20 minutes on this, and then we'll open it up for questions. So as with any crisis, it creates opportunity. And this is going to be your generation's greatest challenge. You're really determining the future of emergency medicine is going to go down here in the next couple of years. Some people think it's going to be, this year. I see it over a couple of years. And there'll be no denying now of the negatives of corporate control. It's out there. ASAP actually did its study. They let a slide slip, but we've got it. We've been using it. It's overwhelmingly the practicing physicians respond negatively to working for a corporation. Now, academics, I'm an academician and I saw a reason to get involved in this. But for by and large, most academic docs are like, oh, well, that's not our problem. It's going to affect them now. I think that you're going to see issues with residency filling. You've already seen, if you go on Reddit or something like that, EM is going to be in some trouble, I think, in this year's match. Because, who's going to, we're hearing about a job crisis, people got to make decisions about their future. And then, this should be a wake-up call to emergency medicine organizations. I mean, it's gotten out of control. The college is trying to apologize. AAEM has been doing some stuff, but I think it's got to kick itself into gear to maybe do more. And if ASAP doesn't step up, I think it's got to be prepared to take an even greater role in the politics of emergency medicine. And a lot of you are probably aware that there's a whole new group formed, the Take EM Back, which is spread into the Take Medicine Back movement, which is really largely focused on fighting private equity, started by a young physician, Mitch Lee. I'm on his board of advisors. And if you're not on that Facebook page, you ought to get on there because there's some really good stuff being done with that group. So it all comes down to money, money, money. That's the why. It's basically making money off of the practicing bedside emergency physician. We're talking over a 30-year career, they're going to make $2 to $3 million off of you over your career. It's basically a 20% profit level that they're going to take from you. So, I wrote an article when Blackstone when Team Health went public back in 2009 and estimated that it was an average of $75,000 per year that Team Health was making in profit off of emergency physicians. And that's even without investment. That's just raw number, right? You give me $75,000, you invested, could be multiplied several times with investment. Now, the reason I got involved was more, the money issues were important, but obviously I'm not, I took the lowest paying job offered to me, but I really connected to how can we're a difficult specialty. I don't have to tell anybody on this call that we are. You can't do something difficult if you feel you're being taken advantage of. That's all there is to it. I mean, residency, you're working really hard. You're not getting paid a lot, but you feel you're getting something worthwhile. You're learning the trade here. But you do that in your career, you should have done, this is it. I'm a doctor, I'm board certified. Why is somebody taking money out of my pocket? And to me, that is the major issue. And that's what those quotes from the rape of EM reflected. So I think it's a threat to you in your career. 9 years abuse, leaving the specialty, well, that's a threat to you and your family. That's your career. I mean, if you're going to be the major breadwinner in your family, that's going to affect them. And if you get burned out, you feel exploited, that creates negative vibes with your family. You come home, you're depressed before your shifts, you're angry after your shifts, and it's just burnout affects the family before it affects anybody else. And obviously, if you're a burned out doc, you feel exploited, you're not happy in your work, you're not going to be the best doctor for your patients. So if we go way back to the formation of emergency medicine, why did this happen? The original AAEM bylaws, which I have a copy of, and it's on the Take EM Back website. We posted that there. They basically said we are forming to preserve the ethical standards and integrity of private practice, not corporate, private. Doctors practicing emergency medicine. That ethical statement says you won't make money off your colleagues. You will not do fee splitting. You will not take advantage. Your income will be derived from your patient care services, and you won't be taking them off of doctors who are your colleagues. And they said we will, no member should allow practice of medicine by a non-physician. Corporations should not practice. ASAP said that in 1968. Whoa. Well, what happened? Well, they saw that, but then the original docs that started were private practitioners. but then the entrepreneurs came in. The foxes started to guard the hen house. The rules were changed. That's no longer the bylaws. They actually silenced the press. You can go to the editor of the Annals of Emergency Medicine, Ron Crome, now departed, basically said, we're not going to debate these issues in the Annals of Emergency Medicine. If you want to discuss it, bring the issue to the council. Well, we did that, and then they shut off debate. They said it was antitrust. So they basically, the leaders did not allow things to be discussed. Henceforth, you got the formation of the American Academy and these other groups. And unfortunately, the group that should be revolting, which is the residents, the largest group, EMRA, is ASAP. That's automatic membership. They own them. You're an EMRA member, you're an ASAP member. So there's not a whole lot that they need to do to, keep EMRA happy, because they're getting automatic dues. I think that's one of the greatest. It's one of the things keeping ASAP alive, and it's one of the greatest things that could affect change early is EMRA went independent. But I've said that many times, and I don't think it's going to happen. So there were a couple of voices of dissent in the 80s. So I'm just starting emergency medicine, right? In 1982, Bob Simon, who was the chair of Cook County, wrote a letter to the editor about entrepreneurism, saying the few are ripping off the many. And if ASAP doesn't address this, we need a new EM society. 10 years later, AAEM forms. Mike Bresler wrote an article was entitled Feudalism in Emergency Medicine, basically saying senior doctors, they have hired hands. We're working the fields for them. It's a feudalistic system. They stay awake at night waiting for blood and other effluvia, and we blithely tax their earnings. We make millions of dollars a year while they're struggling to see the patient at 2 a.m. So there were voices of dissent, but no organizational resistance. And then in the 80s is when contract groups started to rise up. And we'll talk about a couple of them, not all of them for time's sake. But let's focus on Envision here. Started as MCARE. MCARE was created by the 1980 ASAP president, Leonard Riggs. He was the major shareholder in MCARE. When he sold out to Laidlaw in 1996. Now, Laidlaw is a private lay company. They have bus lines. They were doing some ambulance business. And Riggs sold to them so they could make a 20% profit. And he made $40 million selling the right for Laidlaw to make a 20% profit level off of emergency physicians. Laidlaw then opened the door to private equity. They sold to Onyx in 2004. They became Envision when they merged with something called AmSurg, Ambulatory Surgery Centers. And that year of the merger, the CEO was making $21 million a year. I mean, this is big business. This is now we're Wall Street. Now they're owned by KKR, the private equity firm. They were acquired for $9.9 billion. Okay. So when we talk to the college, when we argue with them, we have these things and they say, well, private equity, we know the problems, but they've got power. They've got strength. We need them to fight the insurance industry. The insurance industry is the true evil in emergency medicine. You're complaining about private equity. Well, I don't know what to tell you. The insurance industry is evil, but so is private equity. United Health Group, which is out there as the most evil of the insurers, that's the insurer that just tried to reintroduce retrospective denials. We're going to pay after the fact. If the diagnosis is an emergency, we're not going to pay you. Their CEO made $60 million. Okay. KKR, four of their people made over $100 million. It's the same. These are two evils. And to align with one to fight the other doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I'll tell you, it doesn't mean a whole lot these days now because we may wind up being all working for insurers. So Team Health, it's a roll-up of groups. They started out of the Southeast United States, headquartered in Tennessee, and they acquired these groups that were kind of like the smaller groups with rigs like Fisher Mangold in California. That's the group I actually moonlit for. They had a contract in Easton, Pennsylvania. Carl Mangold, the 1978 president of ASAP, owned that group. And he made money off of me as a resident working alone at night, 12-hour night shifts, driving, almost killing myself on the road after a 12-hour night shift. And I still feel slimed by that. It was only 2 shifts. They acquired groups in the Pacific Northwest, New Jersey. There's a big Team Health affiliate there. It was started by another ASEP board member named Jim George. They're now owned by the Blackstone Group. They had actually been owned by them before. They spun them out in 2009. Now they bought them back in 2016 for $6 billion. Their CEO, Steven Schwartzman, is worth $26 billion. His wealth went from 13 to 26 billion during the pandemic. This guy made a killing during the pandemic, and some of that's off our backs. And EM Docs helped fund his 70th birthday party in Miami, which cost $20 million. Private concert by Gwen Stefani, camera rides on the beach, acrobats. This is what we've allowed to come into the House of Emergency Medicine. So, we had this whole, the EMCare rose up, this and that. All these groups that I'm listing here were putatively physician to own, some of them more equally than others. Premier and EMA, the first two, they had a very tiered partnership structure, but you could eventually become a full partner and become an equal. It took you longer than AAEM would like to see, but they were truly physician to own. But the senior docs all said, there's a lot of money being offered to us. They're offering multiples of our earnings, and we're going to retire. We're going to get a ton of cash, and we're going to sell out the younger docs. We got all the votes, and that's essentially what happened. So Premier sold out to Team Health, EMA mostly of North Jersey sold out to EMCare. EMP then became USACs when it got private equity money in. They say they bought their company back, but they still have Apollo Global Management in there, which is a private equity firm that is loaning them a lot of money. It's probably less controlled by PE, but still PE influence. And these two other groups in Michigan, fairly large regional groups, sold to other private equity-backed companies. And they were both, had high-level officials, Robert Williams, 81 ASEP president, 85 ASEP president, Greg Henry. So you can see this whole, these are people that saw what Riggs did, saw what Mangold did, and decided to cash in. And this is costing you your future. So definitely controlled by private equity are Team Health and Vision and Schumacher. And we just talked about them. Private equity's got a major stake in these other groups. USAC's Apollo MD, which is a separate than Apollo Global Management. There's a different Apollo, and then American Physician Partners. So the estimates are that 30 to 40% of the contracts in the country are controlled by these large contract groups. And this is reflected that we have the lowest percentage of owners of all the specialties. Physicians who say, I own my practice, we're only 26%. I mean, good news, 26% out there.
It's likely more to like 60 to 65% now.
Controlled by CMGs?
Correct.
All right. We just
get Envision and Team Health alone are 35% of the market.
It's getting worse. So the reason we arose here is to make this profit. And the thing about emergency medicine is we have a very low practice overhead. It's, what do? You don't set up an office. You don't pay electric bills. You don't hire nurses. You don't buy computers for your office. You don't pay rent. You go into the ED with your stethoscope, maybe a white coat, and that's it. The hospital provides the EMR, the nurses, they pay the electric bills. You enter stuff into the computer, that gets shipped to the coding and billing company. It gets sent out a bill, they help collect it, and the money comes back. There's virtually, you got your malpractice insurance. You got to pay for who's going to make the schedule, all this kind of stuff. We have a very low practice overhead. We are easier to run, than a family practice, internal medicine practice. So this is one of the reasons why we were ripe for the picking. And we were led to this by a number of the gentlemen I just mentioned. And we're still currently aiding and abetting the corporate practice of medicine. And I believe that large swaths of organized emergency medicine has been complicit by inaction. The failure to address the corporate issues, mostly in the college, of course, not with AAEM, but certainly among academics as well. So this is an example of aiding and abetting. This just got published in EP Monthly, if you get that. If not, search on it and read the article in there by Sullivan about Ray Brovant, who won $29 million off of EMCare. When you look at the case filing of former Texas ASEP president basically in court admitted to one guy owning 275, 300 professional associations for MCare in 20 states. That is a sham, that is unethical, and that violates the law with the corporate practice medicine, especially in Texas. So we've got doctors stabbing other doctors in the back. You won't see what's billed and paid in your name. Okay, they're going to maximize the coding. They're going to inflate the charges. Bills will go out at 800 to 900% of Medicare rates. And they were using, until they got caught, out of network surprise bills as a strategy. The reason you don't see what is being billed and paid in your name, because if you knew and you said, wait a second, you're making $150,000 off of me. What are you giving me in return? Putting me on a schedule isn't worth that. You've got a fee splitting action. So I always tell people, if you're going to remember one thing from my talks, remember that the number one expense of any contract group, any ED group, is a board certified emergency physician. You are the most costly part of the equation. Okay, so that's the expense side. How do you increase revenue? You pressure the physicians to chart better, more patients per hour, supervise multiple MPPs. And look, hey, if you can cut costs by replacing you with an MPP, let's do that. Or how about a cheaper doc? A family practitioner will work for 2/3 of your salary. And, they've got better patient satisfaction skills because we don't teach that in emergency medicine. New grads, hey, I got a fresh grad who will be willing to take it. You've been working for us for 15 years. We give you a cost of living raise and you're complaining about doing night shifts. I'm just going to bring in a fresh new grad and kick you out at the age of 50. Go find a job somewhere. We're terminating you without cost to a younger worker. I mean, this happens in industry all the time, right? Like, my dad got fired from DuPont when he was in his mid 50s and they gave him a retirement package, but the company had some settlements for polluting the environment. They had to cut costs. And there he was with 5 kids flapping in the breeze. It's going to happen in EM. All right. So I don't know if you guys have seen this stuff. This has been on the Facebook pages. These companies clearly are going to just stab you right in the back and replace you. They call them APPs here. This is one of their ads. Raise the standard. NPPs cost 2/3 that of a doctor. This is the cold corporate mindset. Why have a doctor when we can give you a cheaper service? So don't. And then this is another. See up top here. It's an envisionservices.com slide. Use the least expensive resource to accomplish the mission. What do patients think about that? Oh, instead of a board certified doctor, I'm going to use an APP because they're cheaper, or a family practitioner because they're cheaper. So this is the cold corporate calculus. This is what we've led into our specialty. So the future's here. Private equity, the way they advertise themselves to their investors is we're going to give you a return on investment of about 20%. The insurers and government have caught on. United Health Group said, Team Health, you've been overcharging us. You're 800% of Medicare. We're just going to stop paying you that much. So they dropped their payment from 75 to 90% of charges to 15, 20%. Team Health is now suing them for doing that. ProPublica caught Team Health suing poor patients in Tennessee. And then, we've got this whole legislative solution to the out-of-network billing. The solution that we argued for as a specialty, it was employed in New York and it caused a 9% drop in payments. The great solution, we still had a 9% drop in payments. So there's a squeeze on private equity. So their revenues are down, they're going to cut expenses. And again, as I said before, number one is doctor costs. We're hearing reports that there are pay cuts for doctors. They're losing their CME money. You want to scribe, you got to pay for it. We're not going to pay money for licensing fees, et cetera. All right. Now, the PE companies, when they bought all these practices, they did it with debt mostly. Okay. And they've got to, be able to sell you to another buyer. So they got to show ongoing profit levels. So this is a really cataclysmic time because, COVID dropped volumes. Will we see the collapse of PE groups? Will this be an opportunity for emergency medicine or not? This is, like I say, it's a key time. The game has changed. All of ACEP's saying, we need them to fight insurers is out the window, in my view. They say that we're good for EM. Well, I don't think they are. But now Optum, which is a subsidiary of an insurer, now owns Sound Physicians. They have a private equity partner. They own emergency medicine and hospitalists. And Optum is the largest growing physician group in the country. They have other specialties as well. United Health Group, just like Steven Schwartzman, is sitting on billions of dollars because of the pandemic. The patients didn't seek care. You all saw that, right? The insurers made a ton of money and they got to start spending that. We may all be owned by United Health Group shortly. Other insurers are doing that too. All right, so this giant headache. There are things that can be done. There are legal and regulatory opportunities here. One is the corporate practice of medicine doctrine. The other one is fee splitting prohibitions. And then, as Mark and I can talk about as much as you want, there is a lot of support out there for physician-owned groups, including the physician group. California's got this group called the Independent Emergency Physicians Consortium. There's another one in the Midwest. Independent billing companies will help you run your practice because they don't want it to go to Team Health because they want to be able to do your billing. Corporate practice of medicine doctrine, I can give a 10-hour talk on this, but essentially in most states, and in some states very strongly written, the simple doctrine says that a business cannot employ a physician because it disrupts the sacred bond between a patient and their physician. There's also a corporate practice of law doctrine that says lawyers can't be employed by businesses. So when you go to court with these folks, it's like hey, what about you guys? So this exists. Most states have it. It's very strong on those ones I listed. And the whole linchpin, the thread that these companies count on is what that Dr. Gregory Byrne is doing. They're saying that you are employed by, if you read the Brovon suit, Kansas City EM1, which is wholly owned by MCare. Byrne is a figurehead, okay? He's got 200 professional associations. He doesn't even work in Kansas, okay? It's a sham. And when he signs for ownership of that PA, he also signs a document called a stock transfer restriction agreement, which gives him no power. It says if you want to issue dividends, more stock, or sell the PA, the company will immediately replace you. I know this because we're reporting another Texas physician for Team Health for doing the same thing. They got that in depositions when an insurer countersued Team Health for corporate practice. And these doctors are at risk for their licensure for aiding and abetting. So I'm getting ready to report Byrne. I just kind of floated on the internet that who from Texas ASAP is going to do this. I know they're not going to do it. So I got a Texas doc. We're going to work on reporting Byrne. So this is what's going on. That can be pierced. It requires either state board of medicine action, lawsuits on our behalf, fee splitting, the other thing. Essentially, it's prohibited in medicine to give up a piece of your fee to receive business, to receive referrals. Internists can't, a radiologist can't say to Joe internist, send me all your chest x-rays and I'll kick back 10% of my professional fee. It's a basic prohibition. It's every state, it's federal. We're being asked to give up 22% of our fee for the right to see patients. The OIG's already said hospitals can't do this to emergency physicians. It's unethical according to the AMA, Council on Ethical Judicial Affairs. And even in ASAP books, they say it's illegal. Another powerful tool. There's a giant class action out there on all these docs that have worked for Envision and Team Health and had 20% taken off their careers. I've been trying to get people excited about doing that. Someday it's going to happen and it'll be glorious. So you're just a resident, but you're the future of every emergency medicine organization. You're a resident, you've got academic faculty. You got to get them woken up. Academics influence scares ASAP, scares AAEM, because why? Because academic faculty, if they tell you don't join ASAP, join AAEM, that's going to scare the organizations. And we got to get EMRA to speak up. EMRA could be the largest, loudest voice in this because, again, they're bigger than AAEM RSA. And if they start like banging their shoe on the table, it's going to really make a difference. Now, if you're here, you're involved, right? So that's great. And I understand like a bunch of people are going to go on the Hill, but you can get involved in your state medical society. A lot of good stuff is happening around the states with emergency medicine. about people getting involved, like the recent Florida Medical Association meeting. One of our graduates from Temple, she's like rose up, had a couple of great resolutions there, and everybody's just like, yes, we must do this kind of stuff. So you can do stuff in EM, outside of EM. And the final slide is, this is basically, we can't let private equity be part of our specialty. They're in the business of making money for investors. We're in the business of taking care of the public, the poor, the uninsured, the people nobody else wants to take care of. And we should not have private equity. It's just, it's obscene. It's immoral. And anything we think we get out of it is nothing more than a Faustian bargain. So that is my slides. I will stop the share. And Mark, you can jump in. I see you're out of your car. Thank God.
All right. Well, since we've been talking for a while, why don't we start in on some questions? And I'll field some and Bob will field some.
Sounds great. So someone submitted a question in advance. What degree of confidence do you have in regards to implementing sufficient policy changes to prevent physician oversupply?
Right. So physician oversupply is really the key thing is going to be the ACGME EM RRC, the Residency Review Committee, that they are the ones that really need to increase the standards for emergency medicine residencies, because the corporate interests, both hospital networks as well as the big CMG staffing companies, have a vested interest in creating an oversupply. So AM, we've been out on front on this. We actually published the first workforce study that showed this was a problem in 2016, and then again in 2020 before the bigger study that was published last year. We've been contacting the RRC about this issue. And we proposed a solution. We passed a policy statement recently that we think actually will have some teeth, that we should be pinning the number of residents that you get per class to a maximum of one resident for every 3,600 visits at your primary training site. That would end up creating a 40% reduction in the number of residents and would put things back into a steady state. We're working with other organizations to try to garner support for that. I had even earlier today, I had a half-hour conversation with Jillian, the president-elect for ACEP, about this, and we're trying to change some minds. But the reality is that unless we create a significant reduction in the number of new spots and get rid of this perverse incentive, that we're going to have a real problem. So I think a lot of these other solutions people are putting about, like nebulous changes to standards, like you have to do more scholarly activity, or let's go have emergency docs do more telemedicine or something, that's not going to fly. Ultimately, we need to set maximums for the number of residents per program in a way that allows people to not only have their faculty give them more supervision and time, and residents get more procedures and resuscitations, but that also gets rid of the incentives to start up programs and to enlarge programs to use residents as cheap labor and to flood the market.
Way that we can see everybody's faces. All I can see is Mark and Megan. And do we have like a?
I don't know if we can.
Gallery view?
No, not for this
Okay.
style, but we can in the future. Yeah.
I see a bunch of questions being asked in the panel, and we can go on. Mark has proposed a very valid solution to shrinking the number of residencies. I am doubtful that that's going to fly. I just knowing the RRC, knowing emergency medicine, having be sensitive to that suit I talked about, the game suit where the American board was sued. The ACGME is academic type people; they're not based in reality. I think you're going to just see there's going to be a decrease. And everything, well, look, if U.S. grads stop filling it, FMGs are just going to fill all the spots. I don't think FMGs are that stupid. They're not going to take a spot if they can't get a job. So I see that there will be a lot of programs unfilled, that it's going to happen. And we deserve it, right? I mean, look, I was a program director. I was a program here at Temple briefly when I came over. I'm full bore academics. I mean, that is my career. But this oversupply is a real issue. It's devastating. And I think it's going to be market forced. Anesthesiology went through the same thing. I think it was about 15 years ago. CRNAs were taking over the world. Radiology briefly went through it. Oh, Nighthawk is going to destroy the specialty of radiology. And they had a decline. Residencies closed, residencies didn't fill, and then they rebounded, and it was a more stable workforce. So I think there's going to be a giant period of pain, and anybody who's on this call is going to feel the pain. So you got to, you got to go after, protect yourself, protect your family, do what you can, be aggressive in the job market. Look, it's the specialty's on fire. I mean, Dr. Schmitz is going to present a bright picture to you. I just saw her video today about what we did for the workforce. Things aren't as bad. I mean, crap, come on. It is crazy. Okay. There are too many doctors. More residencies are coming online this year. The curve is still going up. It's like COVID in Florida. Well, I heard it dropped a little bit, but read the grass, folks. So I'm not optimistic that we're going to see real things other than marketplace adjustments. Like people are just going to say, screw it. Now, like I'm thinking to myself, what the hell are we going to do with Temple? Like I think anybody who's going to come work here is a special person, right? They're not in for the bucks. They're coming to take care of poor patients. I trust that we're still going to get a great group of people in here. But hopefully a lot of the corporate groups won't be able to fill the programs and they'll shut them. I mean, that's my hope.
So I think this is a good pivoting point to go to this question about what if someone is already at a CMG owned residency program? Will it impact their future to get hired at a regular group? And am I getting sufficient education?
Well, I don't think so. Like I doubt that a lot of people are saying, "Ooh, you were the team health residency, or you were, the USAS residency." I don't think there's a lot of like inherent bias, because that would be saying like the resident, it's their fault. The team health owns that contract. So I personally don't feel that. I mean, the general thing is, is that a competitive program? If you're at an HCA Envision small dinky hospital Florida residency program, I'm not going to look at you to work at Temple University Hospital. On the other hand, if you're at Trauma Center General like Tampa General, which is pretty busy, and you're working at team health residency, then you can probably handle Temple. So it's it's part of that. I mean, when I see applicants in my program, I want to say, you know what you're getting into here? I mean, crap, my shift last night was trauma after trauma. 14-year-old gunshot wound to the chest. That's not for everybody, right? So I want to see people coming, and I think that's how jobs will evaluate you. How do you know you're getting a good education? I mean, you get to see everything. Are NPPs interfering with your education? I mean, you got to call it out yourself. I mean, you should be up front, first line, first pick, get to do the procedures. If it's a residency program, the faculty should be seeing the crazy guy who's been here every single day, and you're seeing the new acute MI. I mean, that's, opportunity, education. Am I getting to see the sickest patients? Am I getting to see enough of them? Am I getting to do procedures? Am I getting to, this is the only time you're going to have where you can see every patient and have adequate backup. Like I told 2 shifts ago, I told an intern, you need to pick up the charts that you don't want to pick up as an intern. The elderly nosebleed, the abdominal pain in the 82-year-old, because I'm here behind you. And you're going to have to see this in 3 years by yourself. So you got to be getting those opportunities.
And then for those of us who are starting to think about job searches, how would I know if a group is owned by a corporate group or a physician demographic group?
Yeah, you got to do a little bit of research. It shouldn't be that hard, at the phase there, because first you got to figure out what's in the area. But if they put out some sort of an ad or something, it'll probably be pretty clear. Otherwise, you gotta do a little bit of homework. What you can do, if you needed to, is you can actually call up the emergency department and ask to speak to the attending who's working, and you can tell them, hey, I'm interested in looking for a job, and I wanted to get the info for the medical director, and if you could, just give me a couple of basics about it. Most of the time they'll be willing to do it. What I've often done is I go to the hospital's website, and you can generally find the emergency docs on the hospital's website. And then if it's not clear from that who they're kind of working for, employed by type of stuff, if you don't have any info, you can do like kind of a Google search on them and find their LinkedIn profiles, and often that'll become kind of clear. That's what I did when I did this, 100 times, trying to classify all the new residency programs over the last, 4 or 5 years into which were run by contract groups and which were run by straight by hospitals or by independent groups.
I would jump in there. I would say, so it's usually not hard to tell the corporate groups because you're going to meet a corporate recruiter and you're going to get Envision Services and Team Health Services and all those telling you. There's the whole range of things. There's the private equity owned. Those are, the ones that's going to be pretty obvious because you're going to be dealing with, you're not going to be dealing with somebody from a hospital X. You're going to be dealing with an Envision recruiter or a Team Health recruiter. Or again, if you respond to an ad. And then there's sort of the regional groups where it's sort of same thing. You'll quickly get the flavor that, this isn't just, they're in like 20 sites. And the more hospitals, the more odds are that it's going to be a tiered system. And then there's the employed situations, right? Where like, I can tell you that, one of the trends that now, whether this is good or bad, like one of our grads took a job in North Jersey and he was going to work for Envision and they kicked Envision out. Now they're all going to be hospital employees. So Envision in North Jersey, there's 2 systems, multi-hospital systems that got tired of them, short staffing, replacing docs not happy, and they're going to employ all their docs. Now, that's a situation where now you're employed, you got protections. You can't be fired for bogus reasons. You're members of the medical staff. That's sort of maybe a better situation. You can advocate for your patients. So there is that whole trend happening as well. And then the physician-owned groups, you got to seek them out. Okay, they're not going to be advertising in the back of EM News. You got to say, this is my area. What are all the hospitals that I can work at within that area? And contact them, like Mark said. Get a hold of somebody, ask your program director, ask your senior faculty. Do you know somebody? Hopefully you have like an alumni. We have an alumni email list. Hey, who knows somebody here or there? Generally there's somebody, like 7 degrees of separation. You can find some connection to somebody via your program. Email it out to your faculty. Hey, faculty, I want to go. I need a job in, Miami. Do you know anybody down there you can refer me to? So it's really a lot of it's connections.
Excellent. So the next one is, instead of relying on the ACGME, could the AAEM or another EM organization make a list of a certain amount of programs that they would essentially say are AAEM certified, so that there would be a smaller number of graduates who would be more qualified for jobs and fellowships after graduation?
Not really. I mean, any AEM certification wouldn't actually hold any weight from any sort of a regulatory, perspective. I mean, sure, we can give a stamp of approval. We do give a stamp of approval right now for certain independent democratic groups that, meet our principles. They can get a certificate of workplace fairness, but it's not going to move the marketplace. It might make somebody a little bit more likely to pursue a job somewhere, but nobody's going to say, I'm not going to go to a residency because, AEM is not, putting a feather in its cap. Now, AEM RSA is working on potentially publishing a list of, who currently, which programs currently are, contract owned or better, what jobs are contract jobs and which jobs are independent or hospital employee jobs. And, that's a different story, but that's more information for your use. But yeah, we're not going to be able to control resident supply by AEM's endorsement or any other organization's endorsement or lack of endorsement of a program.
There's a question above that said, why do CMGs want there to be so many more residencies? Are they leading the creation of new residencies? Well, the more emergency doctors you have, the less you have to pay them. the number one expense is paying for the board certified emergency physician. So it plays into their hands. And oversupply helps the company lower salaries for emergency physicians. And they churn you. I mean, that's a clear reason. They claim that's not the truth. And when if you watch that video from Gillian, she says, well, everybody's saying it's the CMGs and it's really not them. Come on, they know what's going on. I'm sure they're pleased as punch what's going on. We as a specialty, we didn't heed the warning signs. So there are programs, academic institutions are to blame too. There's programs popping up in the Philly area that we clearly did not need. I mean, hell, we just closed Hahnemann Hospital. We've closed hospitals left and right in Philly. Like, weren't you guys watching out? Like, didn't Hahnemann's closed, St. Joe's closed, Northeastern? So some of it is our blame, but certainly the corporations are pleased as punch that we are going to have an oversupply. Somebody asked, what can I do right now to help be part of the change? We mentioned a couple things. If you're a resident, bug your faculty for Christ's sake. I mean, why? I tend to just talk. What are you doing about this? Aren't you concerned about my future? If more chairs spoke up, more academicians spoke up, I try to tweak them all the time. There's been a crack in the window. Some of them are getting pissed off, and I think when we see a decline in applicants next year, we're gonna have a better chance of that. But you can just ask your faculty. You convinced me, you enticed me into emergency medicine. Now I'm not going to be able to get a job, and these corporations are ruining our specialty. What are you doing about that? Why aren't we AAEM active? Why do you send us to ASAP where Envision gives us free shrimp so they can make 20% off us for our entire career and then fire us at the age of 50? It's such a, when I was an early academician, we would yell at each other for taking pens from drug companies. And now we're quiet on companies that take 20% off of our labors at 2:00 in the morning. You take care of a sick patient, you stress yourself out, you risk malpractice, you're working night shifts, and they don't talk about that. You talked about the freaking Genentech TPA sponsored conferences and pens, and you're not talking about this. And SAEM taking ads from Envision now. Man, that just pissed me off. You see how I feel. All righty, got a couple.
Dr. Ryder, do you have anything else to add?
No, I'll take another question though.
Cool. I'm trying to make sure we don't reread some of them. I think Dr. McNamara started to touch on this about why emergency medicine was so susceptible to the influence of corporate groups.
Right. So one is that all the hospital-based specialties are much more vulnerable because, the hospital can make a decision to displace the entire group, and that, especially now that everybody's in hospital networks, then they can, pick and choose to do whatever. So that's an issue that emergency medicine, radiology, anesthesiology, hospitalist medicine, ICU medicine, and pathology are, most affected by. Now, emergency medicine, as Bob mentioned earlier, it's pretty easy to run an emergency medicine practice, and it's pretty easy to really run it at scale. It's not a complicated thing. I'm sure that played part of it. Part of it is there's a lot of money in emergency medicine if you know how to exploit things properly. And emergency medicine generally was the testing ground that everything bad that's happening in emergency medicine with business interests is happening in all the other specialties, but it happens here first, and then it happens in the other hospital-based specialties next, and then it happens in the non-hospital-based specialties after that. Also, we had a professional organization that worked hand in hand with those who exploited emergency medicine, that many of the initial leaders of the contract groups were the presidents of ACEP. That happened countless times. But what happened also is in the 1980s and 1990s, the small independent groups, a lot of them really weren't very good at running their business. And the contract groups outcompeted them when they got organized and figured out how to do it right. Since then, the better independent democratic groups don't get outcompeted anymore because they got good at what they're doing. And those that, so you either failed or you lost your contract or you sold out. So the ones that are left now are very strong. Contract groups haven't been able to win contracts from these groups. What they do is they try to buy them out. And now the buy-up money's pretty much gone away. And the groups that wanted to sell out have kind of stopped selling out because they've already been sold. So the contract groups don't outcompete anybody. They only have three things to offer a hospital that's really special that an independent group can't do. One is that they put a lot of effort into marketing and sales. Independent groups don't really do that because they don't have a benefit of getting really big because everybody's an equal owner in a truly democratic group. Two is that they offer the hospital the ability that we will get rid of any doctor you don't like. And independent democratic groups don't do that. They say, hey, we're only going to get rid of doctors for a valid reason. And we're not going to get rid of them for a not valid reason because they're an owner in the business here and they're a partner in the business. And then, the third thing that they kind of do differently is that they've been much more effective at just sucking a tremendous amount of money from every patient through doing a lot of nefarious things, being very aggressive with the out-of-network billing and suing patients and things like that, that independent democratic groups of physicians that live and work in the community aren't comfortable bankrupting their patients. But in terms of pretty much every other aspect, the independent groups do a much better job of running the emergency department and certainly of recruiting and retaining the best doctors because they're able to pay about 50% more because so much of it's not being sucked up by debt expense and bloated administrative salaries and by profit. And the doctors have an owner mentality. If you are an owner of your own practice, you're going to care a lot more when you go to work and when you're doing things for the group and for the hospital outside of work than you are if you're just working the shift for the man.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. And I think some of it is our nature too. Look, we choose a specialty where we see the homeless, victims of violence, domestic violence, drug problems. We're not the plastic surgeons. We don't, the old joke about have you hide a dollar from a plastic surgeon? Like you don't. You can't do that, right? So we were there, and I could talk a long time, but the academicians split off into SAEM. They should have controlled ASAP. Should have been the moral force, and they weren't. And the entrepreneurs took it over, changed the game, told us nothing could be done. Shot. I mean, you saw those slides. It's a very easy story when you look at it in the broad spectrum to see what happened to us. And they've effectively stifled the revolution. Residents were crazy back in the 60s and 70s, and there was still some of that hangover when I was a resident. We didn't take grief from anybody. And now it's like, we got the generate. I got to get the job. I got to secure my future. I don't want to, and I understand that. And they're controlled. So hopefully the pendulum will swing. It's already starting to, like I'm telling you about, hospitals kicking out the corporate groups, and you guys being on this call right now. The new generation is pissed off, and hopefully I'll live to see the day when the tide is turned. I think we've stemmed it. I don't think we've turned it, but every little bit helps.
Well, thank you both so much. Do you guys have any closing comments before we wrap this session up?
Yeah, just keep fighting the good fight. All is not lost. I do think that, that there's lots of possibilities to really turn things around for our specialty. This has been a very rewarding career for me. I know it's been a very rewarding career for Bob. And I'm very confident that there are a lot of great things that are going to happen in the future, but certainly we have to get our house in order.
Yeah. EM in its purest form is the greatest specialty out there. I mean, you really get to help people. And, we just got to make it better. And, we have the moral high ground here, what we're trying to do. Doctors for other doctors, doctors for patients, just kick the businesses out. And thanks for having us on this call.
Yes, thank you both so much for your time and your expertise. And then for the attendees, we are giving away a $100 voucher to cover some of the travel costs to go to our AAEM RSA Advocacy Day in October. So I'm going to just quickly pull up the raffle. Let me just share my screen. There we go. All right. So let me just click to spin this. Congrats, Luke.
That's awesome. All right, we'll see you guys.
Thanks, Dr. McNamara. So Luke, we will reach out to you to get your info and get in touch about your winnings. So thank you everyone for attending our first Climbing the Hill session. We're gonna have 3 more. The next one is going to be September 8th about NPPs and scope of practice. Then September 22nd, we'll do resident and student wellness. And then October 6th, we will have a session on workplace violence. We hope to see everyone there. If not, hopefully we will see you all at Advocacy Day. Thank you so much.